What's the funniest thing you have seen in the courtroom? Story 1. A criminal defendant was upset his case was taking too long to be called. He charged at the judge, got tased, and ended up breaking his clavicle. I was clerking that day, and since the judge I normally work for was at a CLE, I was helping out at the municipal court across the street. I walked in just as a solicitation case was being called. The city prosecutor presented her evidence. The defendant was caught with a street worker in his car behind a Salvation Army store. It seemed pretty straightforward, except the woman said they didn't have sex and she didn't get money from him. The police officer admitted he didn't see them having sex either, but said he had already picked her up earlier that week for the same thing and assumed it was happening again. Instead of taking the win, the defense attorney decided to go all in with his planned defense. He said his client was a born-again Christian who was just giving the woman a ride in the rain while telling her about Jesus. He called 3 character witnesses: the defendant's mother, his priest, and his boss. They all said he was a caring, religious man. Then the attorney called his client to the stand. Everything went fine until cross-examination. The prosecutor asked, "Have you been convicted of solicitation with this same woman a year ago?" The defendant said yes. Then she asked if he paid her $30 for oral activity that day. He denied paying $30, not that it happened, but that he paid that much. They went back and forth until he blurted out, "I never pay $30. I only pay $20 because I know how to avoid getting ripped off." He said this in front of his mother, priest, boss, the entire courtroom, and the judge. I tell this story every time one of my clients wants to take the stand, though I leave out the part where the judge declared there wasn't enough evidence and found him not guilty. Story 2. Prosecutor. Do you see that person in court? Witness squints and looks around the room. Judge. If you don't recognize anyone, you can say so. Witness. It's that guy right there at the table. I just wanted to give him false hope. Story 3. I had a case where my client was accused of possessing a substance in jail. The judge was giving the usual instructions when we broke for the day. Don't research the case, don't talk about it, and don't go to the scene of the crime. I must have had a strange look because the judge quickly added, as impractical as that may be. Story 4. One of my clients, a grown man, wet his pants during trial. He whispered that he needed to go to the bathroom, but the victim in this stalking case was almost done testifying, so I told him to hold it for 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, he said he really had to go. We approached the bench, I explained the situation, and the judge reluctantly agreed to a break. But when I got back to the table, he had already done it. We had to stop for the day since he was a large man, and the office had no replacement pants. He didn't have any medical condition to explain it, and we had already taken many restroom breaks. I had even told him to ease up on the water, which he did not. Story 5. One client just needed to turn himself in for processing and then get released. The bond was already set, so it should have taken a few hours. He went out to his car to put his phone and wallet away. The prosecutor stormed up to me, demanding to know where he went and blaming me for letting him leave. I said, "What did you expect me to do? Tackle him?" 2 minutes later, he walked back in, ready to go. Story 6. I had a client fake faint during sentencing. Despite my warnings, he truly believed he would win at trial. I knew the faint was fake because it was exactly the kind of dramatic thing he would do. He made sure to fall toward me so I could catch him. When I stepped aside, he tried and failed to stop himself from hitting the floor. He hit his head on the bench behind us, and the judge continued sentencing without missing a beat. Story 7. A client was testifying in a domestic violence case. When asked to describe what he was wearing on the day in question, he actually said, "A tank top. You know, a B-word beater." The jury laughed. He was found not guilty, and he was in fact not guilty. Story 8. During a trial break, my client asked, "So when are we going to start?" This was after the jury had been selected, sworn in, we'd done openings, and were already in the middle of testimony. I told him, "We started like an hour and a half ago." Story 9. I was arguing a defense appeal before a 3-judge panel. The prosecutor was about 2 minutes into her argument when she lifted her notepad, shrieked, and stepped back. Everyone stared at her, and she sheepishly said, "I'm sorry, there's a stink bug on the podium." Without missing a beat, one of the judges said, "Then the proper remedy is a motion to quash." The room chuckled. Story 10. A criminal defendant was caught with potted cannabis plants in the backseat of his car at 6 p.m. in the Taco Bell drive-thru. During sentencing, the judge joked, "I thought you didn't go to Taco Bell until after 11 p.m. if that substance was involved." Story 11. I had several probable cause hearings back-to-back. While my last client's case was heard, several inmates in the gallery overheard the judge binding him over for trial after the police found substance residue in his trash. Some of the inmates asked the judge if the police were even allowed to do that. The judge began explaining about abandoned property and privacy rights, then stopped and said, "I just realized I'm advising 8 inmates on how to destroy evidence." Story 12. In housing violations court, A woman was ticketed for having grass that was too long. She came in with cell phone photos showing it had been cut and handed her phone to the judge. He casually critiqued the mowing, saying it could be better, but was leaning toward dismissing the ticket. Then he swiped to the next photo, froze, and shouted, "What is that?" Everyone thought it was something awful, but it turned out her teenage kid had dug a massive hole in the yard in an attempt to make a pond. Story 13. Back in the 1990s, there was a misdemeanor gun court for people caught with unregistered firearms. The judge, whose brother was a Hall of Fame NFL quarterback, always dismissed the charges. About half the time, the defendants would ask if they could get their confiscated gun back. The judge would say, "You want to know how to get your gun back? Walk out the front door of this courthouse, look up at the sky, and wait. When your gun falls down from heaven, that's when you get it back." Story 14. A judge offered a defendant, not my client, a deal on a misdemeanor marijuana case. If he got a medical marijuana card and brought it to his next court date, the judge would dismiss the case. At the time, medical marijuana was legal in the state, recreational legalization was coming soon, and cards were easy to get. On the next court date, the room was packed. As soon as the defendant walked in, the judge called out to him and asked if he got his card. The place went silent, waiting for his answer. He strolls in wearing a shirt with a giant marijuana leaf on it, smelling strongly of weed and looking obviously high. He grins, says he has the card, and holds it up. The judge asks, "Are you high right now?" He replies, "Definitely," and laughs like Wiz Khalifa. Then the judge asks, "How'd you get here today?" Clearly trying to figure out if he drove in that condition. Before anyone could stop him, he proudly says, "I took the bus." The judge grins and says, "Right answer." The entire courtroom bursts out laughing, and people were still chuckling for a full minute after he left. Story 15. My brother was on a jury back in the MySpace days. A woman was suing for a back injury after being hit by a big rig during foggy weather. On the last day of the trial, they asked if she had a MySpace account. They pulled up her public profile for the jury. Right there was a photo of her dancing on the hood of a car, along with a message she had written saying she shouldn't go out too much because her lawyer told her she had to look injured. She lost the case. Story 16. I was sitting in court waiting for my turn when a littering case came up. The officer testified that he saw the defendant throw the clear wrapper from a pack of gum out his car window. The defendant decided to represent himself. His girlfriend took the stand. He asked, "Did I throw a gum wrapper out the window?" She smiled and said, "No, you did not." The man grinned, thinking he'd just won, and asked, "What did I throw out the window?" She replied, "It was the plastic wrapper from your cigarettes." He ended his defense right there. Apparently, he thought the case would be dismissed just because the officer misidentified the type of plastic trash he admitted to throwing out the window. Story 17. My dad is an attorney, and he told me this one. A guy was accused of using a sledgehammer to smash a wall and break into private property with others. Police arrived, and he was the only one caught. Months later in court, a cop testified that the defendant was the only one apprehended, but 2 others had fled. My dad's client suddenly lit up like he had an aha moment and proudly told the judge, "That's not true, there were 4 of us." He must have thought correcting the number of accomplices would somehow help his case. It didn't. He was found guilty of vandalism. My dad said the judge just sighed and suggested my dad keep his client quiet. Story 18. A landlord didn't want to sue for eviction under her own name because she was taking rent in cash, not declaring it, and the building was in foreclosure. So she had her accountant sue the tenants in his name. The accountant thought there was something called client-accountant privilege and that it would protect them. He showed up to eviction court with no legal connection to the building or the leases, insisting he could call the landlord to vouch for him. The judge dismissed the case without prejudice, telling them you can't sue someone under another person's name just to hide your own illegal activity. Story 19. I was working court staff during a hearing where a man was accused of robbing a grocery store. His lawyer argued that the man in the surveillance footage couldn't be identified as his client. While the video played for the court, the defendant leaned over and, loud enough for his lawyer to hear, asked, "Do you think they can tell that's me in the video?" Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. Press the video on screen for another video like this.